He didn't ask permission when he touched me. He assumed, but I didn't stop him either. Not when his breath hit my collarbone. Not when his hand slid beneath silk like it belonged there. Because the real mistake wasn't touching me. It was thinking he started it. I led him to that bed. I let him believe it was his idea. And by the time he figured it out, he was already mine. Liked that? Then you already know what to do. Tap like. Subscribe. Stay close. Because the next one, it won't ask before it takes you. The first thing I noticed was the sound of his shoes, not the man, not the voice, the shoes. They struck the old wood floor of the hallway like they owned it. Slow, steady, assured. Leather soles against varnished grain. No hesitation. As if each step had already been measured and approved by someone. Someone like him. I stood at the edge of the bedroom, barefoot, wrapped in the dress I'd made with my own hands. Ivory silk, fitted at the waist, long-sleeved with buttons, trailing down the spine like a countdown. It wasn't the dress his mother had selected for me. That one still hung in the closet, untouched, too perfect. This one was mine. Every seam, every hidden stitch beneath the left cuff. Measured, planned, stitched over months, just like this night. He opened the door, not rushed, not tentative. He opened it the way he did everything, with calm power. Tall, black shirt, sleeves rolled just enough to show a watch I already knew was 3 minutes fast. No tie, no ring, just him. Caleb Voss. He looked at me for exactly 2 seconds longer than he meant to. Then, a nod, like I was one of his many acquisitions. One more building deed. One more silence purchased. You're awake. I tilted my head slightly. I was wondering if you'd show. That earned the faintest flicker in his eyes. Just a tick of surprise. Easily missed. But I didn't. He walked in, glancing briefly around the room. I knew he was checking details. He always did. The camera hidden in the sconce behind him blinked red once. He didn't notice. I did. He poured himself a drink. Whiskey. 2 fingers. No ice. I watched the glass. Not because I wanted a drink, but because it gave me a moment to study his rhythm. Controlled, practiced, cold. He handed me a folder. Cream-colored. Sealed with a black string. This is the marriage agreement. I want your signature before we continue. I didn't flinch. I didn't reach. Instead, I pulled open the drawer of the nightstand and handed him an identical folder, already signed. Dated 3 days before yours, I said softly. His jaw tightened. He looked down, flipped through the pages. Identical clauses, identical font. My signature at the bottom. Time-stamped, notarized, sealed, ironclad. His silence filled the room like fog. I didn't know it would be this easy, I added, almost to myself. But not really. He set the folder down slowly. You signed this before the ceremony? Nodded. Before you even received your version? He narrowed his eyes. Why? Because I wanted to be sure I was choosing this, not just accepting it. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, as if to reclaim control, he stepped closer. A calculated 2 steps. You know what this night is. I didn't step back. I didn't break eye contact. Yes, I said. But I also know what it isn't. And what's that? A conquest. He studied me. I could feel the tension begin to shift. Not much, not yet, but enough. Enough to make him unsure who exactly was standing in front of him. The virgin bride? Or something else? Entirely, I bent down as if to pick up the comb from the floor. The one I'd let drop earlier, carefully placed to fall near the edge of the rug where it would make just enough sound. He didn't move, but I saw his hand twitch. watching me. Not the comb. Me. Stood slowly and walked past him, close enough that the hem of my dress brushed his leg. Close enough for him to smell the faint jasmine I dabbed behind my ear, the one scent he associated with his late wife. No one had told me that, but I'd read the interview transcript. From 2 years ago. Page 4. "Why jasmine?" I heard him ask. "It settles the air," I replied, without turning. I could feel him watching me, not with desire, not yet, but with something more, dangerous. Doubt. I sat at the edge of the bed, letting the silence settle. Then, softly, "Do you think I'm afraid of you?" His voice was even. "Should you be?" I smiled, not sweetly. "Only if you think power works the same on everyone." He stayed standing, glass in hand, watching me like a wolf circling what it thought was prey, not realizing it had wandered into a trap made of mirrors. "I thought you were," he began. "Innocent?" I finished. He didn't answer. I stood, again slowly, and leaned in, close enough for him to feel my breath on his collarbone. "Let's be clear, Mr. Voss. You may own this house, but I own what happens in this room." He didn't move, didn't speak, not because he didn't want to, because he was still calculating, trying to find the move he missed. That's how it begins, isn't it? Not with fireworks, not with romance, not with rings or kisses, but with the sound of shoes on polished wood and the realization that the person you thought you owned was already watching you lose. The morning after our wedding, I made coffee like it was any other day. There was something sacred in the routine, in the clink of porcelain, the scent of roasted beans, the slight hiss of the kettle. I moved slowly, deliberately. Caleb wasn't awake yet, or if he was, he hadn't made a sound. Good. Men like him don't like waking up surprised. They like waking up in charge. But today, the rhythm was mine. I wore white again. Not the wedding dress, not even silk, just cotton, loose, comfortable, but still white, still deliberate. White draws attention, but it also deceives. It tells people you're clean, untouched, harmless. Exactly what I needed him to keep thinking, for now. He walked in around 7:10, barefoot, in slate gray pajama pants and a white shirt still creased from the packaging. Looked like a man trying not to look like himself. And failing. "You're up early," he said, voice scratchy. I didn't turn. Old habits. "You always dress like that for breakfast." Now I turned. "Do you always question the color of your wife's clothes?" He paused. Only for a second. But I counted. 1, 2. No. But I do question things that feel too calculated. "That must make your life very complicated." A faint smile curved his lips, but not the kind that meant he was winning. We sat across from each other at the long table that could seat 14. Neither of us touched the center, the empty stretch of polished wood between us like a diplomatic no-man's land. He watched me eat. I let him. Then, without warning, I dropped my fork. It clattered against the tile. Loud, sharp, deliberate. I bent down to pick it up, letting my hair fall forward, my dress shift slightly, revealing the curve of my shoulder. Subtle. Almost. Accidental. Almost. I caught his eyes on me when I rose. "Clumsy," I said softly. "That was strategic," he replied. "Ah, so he noticed. Good." Later I wandered into his office. On paper, by mistake. In truth, by timing. He wasn't there. The door had been unlocked. I'd calculated that part too. I moved quickly. Nothing invasive, just a walk past the shelves, a glance at the digital lock on his filing cabinet. 3. Numbers. Grease smudges on the 4, 6, and 9. Interesting. I turned toward the window, letting my reflection fall across the glass just as I heard footsteps approach. I stayed still. Let him catch me. "You're in the wrong room," Caleb's voice said behind me. I turned slowly, blinking as if startled. "Am I? This is my office." I saw the door open. I didn't mean to intrude. He didn't believe me. I didn't care. He was searching my face now, the way a man searches a riddle for the part he missed. "You're different this morning," he said. "Am I allowed to be? You were quieter yesterday, and you were more sure of yourself." The silence cracked, only for a second. I stepped past him to leave, brushing his arm lightly as I passed, enough to feel the tension in his muscles, the question forming behind his silence. "What do you want, Lily?" I stopped in the hallway. Didn't turn. "What do you want, Mr. Voss?" He didn't answer. He never did when the question was real. That night, I sat on the balcony overlooking the garden. The night air smelled of cedar and wet leaves. Somewhere in the dark, wind chimes stirred, glass on glass, music without rhythm. Caleb joined me, quietly. No shoes. His presence pressed against the quiet like a thumb against silk. "You're not afraid of me," he said. "Should I be?" He looked out into the garden. His voice came softer this time. "Most people are." That sounds lonely. "It's practical." "No. Practical is locking your office door." That made him turn. I didn't flinch. He stepped forward. Just one step. But it shortened the distance between us by half. "What are you trying to do?" "Observe. You're studying me. You make it easy." I rose from my chair and walked past him again, the same way I had earlier. Deliberate, smooth, silent. This time, he reached out, just enough to graze my wrist, stopped, waited. He didn't say anything, neither did I. Then I turned my hand, letting his fingertips slide across my palm. Not affection, not surrender. A calculated pause. Then I pulled away. "Good night, Mr. Voss." "Lily." I looked over my shoulder. You're not what I expected." I smiled, slow and quiet. That's the point. The first time I saw Caleb Voss, he didn't see me. It was a gallery auction on a rain-heavy Thursday. Manhattan was slick with puddles and too many umbrellas, the city, grinding in its usual quiet violence. I wore black. I carried canapes. I wasn't on any guest list. He walked in alone. No entourage, no coat. Hair slightly damp, sharp-edged and moving like time itself. I didn't know then what I wanted from him, but I knew I'd remember him. He stood at the far end of the room, silent as people orbited him, not speaking, not needing to. One man leaned in to shake his hand. Another woman laughed too brightly and touched his shoulder. He didn't react to either. He stared at the painting. Fisherman, 1937, muted tones, a man in a boat, holding a net with nothing inside. The auctioneer said the piece represented futility. Caleb bought it anyway. That night, I wrote the first entry in the leather notebook that would become the closest thing I had to a strategy map. Didn't write his name, not yet, just a description. Man in the corner, hands folded. Unreachable. Buys emptiness on purpose. I started following him. Not in the way people think. No trench coats, no tailing cars. Just data. Where he ate, alone. What he read, hardcovers with cracked spines. Who he trusted. Almost no one. 3 months later, I applied for a job at a boutique tailoring house that serviced some of his firm's clients. I took less pay for closer access. Every time his assistant dropped off a suit, I watched for thread color, for notes left in pockets, for details most people never saw. Then came the headline: Caleb Voss terminates engagement with Virginia Hale, heiress to Hale Holdings. It wasn't public scandal. It was corporate. It told me what I needed to know. He didn't run from conflict. He planned it. That night I wrote, "He doesn't burn bridges. He builds the explosives himself." My mother found the notebook once. She asked me without asking, "Is this about revenge?" I said no, it wasn't. Revenge implies injury. What I felt wasn't pain. It was clarity. I had seen too many women like her, radiant, gifted, used. Left with their youth gone and their silence intact. My mother was beautiful, too trusting, too still. She once told me, "Love is something you fall into." I never wanted to fall. I wanted to land. A year passed. Then 2. I learned his rhythms, like a language. Every July, he vanished to a house in upstate New York. Every January, he fired someone, always with cause, always clean. He donated anonymously to a domestic violence shelter. He fired a board member who laughed at a waitress. He wasn't cruel. He was exact. And I began to see the outline of something else beneath the man, a fault line. 3 years after the auction, his company's old CFO was indicted. I used that moment, just enough of a crack in his circle, to approach a mid-level, contact with a contract, discreet bridal design work for a client who might want something private. It was bait. He took it. 1 month later, I got the email. Interested in a non-disclosure-bound design project? No press, no fittings, high compensation. Sender, H. Sloan, Executive Liaison. Recipient, me attached, address of Voss Tower. I said yes. The contract was real. The money was real. But what mattered wasn't the check. It was the room I entered when I handed off the initial sketches. He wasn't supposed to be there, but he was. And just like at the gallery, he saw everything. This time, including me. "You're the one who sent this?" he asked, lifting the folder. I nodded. "You don't look like a designer," he said. "You don't look like someone who needs one." We didn't smile, but something moved in the room, just enough to make the air stretch thin. I left without shaking his hand. 3 weeks later, the proposal came. Unorthodox, mutually beneficial, confidential. A marriage offer between a man who trusted no one and a woman he thought he'd just met. Back in the present, I sit alone in the study of the house where we are now legally bound. The fireplace flickers. The wind outside taps the windows with skeletal fingers. The house feels like it's holding its breath. I open the notebook again. I still haven't written his name. Just the lines. He's beginning to suspect. Not what I am, but that I am something. The game begins now. And I am not here to win love. I am here to make sure I never have to ask for it. Rain tapped the windows that night like fingers too polite to knock. The dining room was dark, except for one overhead pendant, casting long shadows across the table. Caleb sat at the far end, reading through a contract, his face blank, the kind of blank that takes years to perfect. He hadn't spoken much since yesterday. I didn't need him to. The silence was saying plenty. I brought in 2 mugs of tea. Not wine, not coffee, just black tea, strong and unflavored. The kind that leaves aftertaste and questions. "You didn't have to," he said, not looking up. "You didn't ask me to." He glanced at me then, as if hearing something underneath the words. Good. We sat across from each other, a replay of the morning before. Same table, same distance. Only now, I leaned forward a little more than usual, letting him feel it. Not desire, pressure. "You always read contracts during dinner?" He turned a page. "It's easier to digest than conversation." "No offense," he added flatly. "None taken," I said. "You're not the first man who prefers ink over intimacy." That made him pause. Just slightly, just enough. I saw it. "You're different from what I expected," he said. "Good," I answered. Expectation is the first form of laziness. The tea cooled. The air didn't. Somewhere between the next question and the third sip, I stood. I walked around the table. Slowly, not seductively. I stopped next to him, not touching, just close enough to be counted. Look at me. He did. Not instantly, not obediently, but eventually. And when he did, I saw the same man I saw 3 years ago in that gallery, composed, sharp, entirely alone. So I kissed him, not with affection, not with flirtation, not even curiosity. It was surgical. 3 seconds, just enough pressure, just enough breath, a controlled collision, not lips to lips, but strategy to instinct. Then I pulled back. He didn't move, didn't blink. I smiled. Now you're wondering what that meant. What did it mean? He asked. It means I've already counted how many ways you're trying not to touch me. That time his breath changed, just slightly. I walked away, back to my side of the table. Sat, sipped. He stared. Was that a game? He asked. No, I said. That was a statement. And what was the message? I looked at him across the flickering table light. That if I ever decide to take you apart, I won't need to raise my voice. He stood then, slowly. His chair scraped the floor like a warning. He walked toward me. Not fast, not threatening, but direct. My pulse didn't change, but I let my hand tremble as I lifted the tea. Slightly. Just enough for him to notice. To think I was nervous, fragile, overwhelmed. You're not afraid, he said. I never said I was. But you want me to think you are? I smiled. Just one corner of my mouth. No. I want you to wonder if I am. That was the moment it shifted. He knew something was off, but he didn't know where the imbalance lived. Was it in the kiss? The silence? The way I never quite looked away when he tried to intimidate me? That's the worst kind of uncertainty, the kind that makes a man like Caleb ask questions instead of give orders. He turned and left the room without another word, but I knew what he would do next. He would replay the kiss, over and over, not for the pleasure, but for the failure to categorize it. Later that night, I stood at the hallway mirror brushing my hair, counting to 60 slowly as I watched the reflection behind me, empty. At second 37, I heard his footsteps. He didn't pause this time. He walked past, silent. But I felt the weight of his stare burn across my back. When I returned to the bedroom, a note lay on the nightstand. Not handwritten, typed, businesslike. The terms of our agreement remain unchanged. No physical obligations unless mutually initiated. That kiss does not qualify as mutual. I smiled as I folded the paper. Because he was wrong. That kiss qualified as declaration. I opened my notebook, flipped to a fresh page. No name. Just the line. He tasted like restraint. But his silence tasted like surrender. The rain returned that night. Heavier, angrier. It clawed the windows like it wanted in, but the house stayed warm. Still, waiting. I waited too. I lit a single lamp near the bed. Dim, amber. The kind that blurs the edges of everything, even truth. The silk robe I wore was pale gray. No lace. No games. Just fabric that whispered over skin. I knew the layout of the room by now. Every creaking board, every inch of carpet. And more importantly, I knew what he expected to find when he walked in. Obedience. Nervousness. Maybe desire. If he was lucky, he wouldn't get any of that, not tonight. He entered around 10:43 p.m. I heard his steps before I saw him. Slower than usual. His shirt was undone at the collar. His sleeves were rolled. Rain still clung to the ends of his hair. "You're awake," he said. "So are you." He looked at the bed, then back at me. "You're not under the covers." "I'm not cold." He hesitated. The first crack. Then he stepped inside, closing the door behind him like someone sealing a room off from air. He stood there, silent, waiting for me to flinch. Instead, I moved toward him. 1 step. 2. Barefoot. Silent. I reached up, touched the front of his shirt, and began unfastening the buttons. 1. 2. 3. I felt his chest tighten under my fingers. But he didn't stop me. "This isn't what we agreed," he said. "No," I whispered. "It's what I've decided." That threw him. Good. Because every part of him had lived in that contract. Every inch of safety was written into clauses and signatures. But there were no clauses now. Just breath. And skin. And intention. His shirt hit the floor. I stepped back. Let him see that I wasn't trembling. Let him feel how still I could be. Even here. Even now. Then I undid my robe. Slowly. Let it slide off my shoulders. Not with seduction, with precision. The way you undress a blade. He stepped forward then. Slowly. Like a man walking into water he doesn't trust. His hand rose to my cheek, caught his wrist, held it. Not tightly, but firmly enough that he paused. "This only happens," I said, "if you understand that I'm not something to be taken." "Then what are you?" he asked, voice low. "A line," I said, "and you're about to cross it." The kiss came from him this time, but it wasn't dominant. It was uncertain, exploratory. I let it happen. Let him feel like he had a say. Then, I pulled him down onto the bed. Not harshly, not gently, just inevitably. There was no music. No whispers of love. No fake gasps. Just breath. Flesh. Movement. Each motion deliberate. Each touch a test. And every time he thought he had rhythm, I changed it. Every time he reached for control, I shifted my weight, my hands, my mouth, and took it back. He realized it halfway through, that he wasn't leading, that I wasn't following, that all of this, was a sequence I'd chosen long before he walked into the room. And when he tensed, uncertain, trying to find footing, I leaned in and whispered, "Still think you're claiming me?" He didn't answer, because he couldn't. After, he lay still, chest rising unevenly, hands at his sides, head turned toward me, but eyes unfocused. I rose from the bed, pulled my robe back on, walked to the mirror, adjusted my hair. "You're quiet," I said. He sat up slowly. "You planned this?" "Of course." "Why?" I turned, looked him dead in the eyes. "Because I needed you to know something before we go any further." "What's that?" "That the first time we touched, I wasn't yours, and you weren't mine. You were on loan, and now, I've returned you to yourself." He looked away then. That was the surrender. Not the sex. That, the moment. He realized I'd taken what no contract could protect. His certainty. I opened the drawer beside the bed, pulled out my notebook, wrote one line, deliberate, permanent. He touched me like a promise, but I held him like proof. He didn't come to bed that night. I heard the door click behind him after I closed my eyes. He didn't slam it. Caleb. Voss never slammed doors. He didn't need to. People like him didn't shout to be heard. They withdrew, and the silence did the punishing for them. But this time, the silence punished him. At 3:08 a.m., I woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. slower than usual, barefoot, uncertain. I didn't move. I knew where he was going. There were only two things I had ever left visible in the entire house, my dress form and the drawer I hadn't locked. He found the notebook before dawn. I imagined the moment, his fingers brushing over the worn leather cover, flipping it open, expecting poetry or maybe a grocery list. Instead, 4 years of recorded behavior. Meeting locations, timestamps, emotional responses, notes on his voice when he was tired, his tells when he lied, his exact phrasing during negotiations, and how often he repeated keywords when nervous. He never knew he had tells. But I did. At 6:42 a.m., he entered the bedroom. His face was unreadable, but his sleeves were rolled. And Caleb never rolled his sleeves unless something inside him was unbuttoning too. He didn't hold the notebook like a weapon. He held it like something fragile that still cut. "You wrote about me," he said. "Yes. You watched me for years." I did. Why? I stood, not rushed, not defensive. I walked over to the window, let the morning light touch only the side of my face, because I needed to know how far men like you would go to feel powerful. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he asked quietly, "Was I ever not a target?" I turned then, not angry, not triumphant, just still. "You were never a target. You were a blueprint." "A blueprint for what?" "For everything I'd never let happen to me." He sat, not on the bed, on the floor. Not dramatically. Like his legs just didn't hold him up the way they used to. That was the moment. Not when he read the pages, not when he found the notes, but when he sat on the floor. That was the moment he knelt. And it wasn't for me. It wasn't submission. It was realization. "Did you ever actually want me?" he asked, voice thick. "Not at first." And now, I walked over, sat on the edge of the bed, looked down at him like someone looking into water, trying to gauge the depth. "Now, I want to see if you're capable of becoming something outside of power." "That's not love." "No," I agreed. "It's clarity, and it's more honest than any vow I've ever heard." He rested his elbows on his knees, hands locked together. His head dropped for a moment. Then he said, "I don't know who I am with you." I leaned down, touched his chin lightly. Made him look at me. "That's the point, Caleb. You were always the man people saw coming. I want to see who you are when you don't arrive prepared." He stood slowly. But something in him had softened, or broken, or simply let go. "You win?" he said quietly. "This wasn't a war." "It was." "Then why are you still here?" He looked at me. The first time he really looked, without calculation or edge. "Because even if I wasn't what you planned for, you've become the only thing I can't plan around." I stepped forward, rested my forehead lightly against his chest, not to yield, not to comfort, just to feel the beat of a man who was finally out of rhythm. "This marriage doesn't need saving," I whispered. "It needs honesty. And for once, neither of us is good at that." We stood there for a long time, two people with every wall exposed. Not in love, but dangerously close to whatever comes before it. Later, he left the notebook on my pillow. Untouched, unburned. I flipped to the back and wrote one last line. Not about him, about me. I didn't build a trap. I built a room with no exits, to see if he would stay. The sun broke through the curtains like it had no idea what we'd been through. It spilled gold across the hardwood floors, brushing the edge of the bed where I sat alone, knees pulled up, spine straight, robe tied like armor. Caleb wasn't in the room. He hadn't slept beside me. But the notebook was still there, on the pillow, exactly where he'd left it. Unburned. unmarked, unread beyond what he needed to see, which meant one thing. He didn't want to win anymore. Downstairs I heard sounds, dishes being moved, cupboards opened and closed. For once it wasn't the staff. I could tell. Caleb was making breakfast. Not well, not naturally, but he was trying. I stayed upstairs, not to punish him, not to test him, to see how long it would take for him to come find me. It took 26 minutes. I heard his steps outside the door before he knocked. Softly. Once, like a question. "It's open," I called. He entered, holding two mismatched mugs. One had coffee, one had tea. He didn't know which I preferred. That mattered more than he realized. "I wasn't sure what you wanted," he said. "That's new for you." He didn't argue. He handed me both mugs. I took the tea. He sat, on the edge of the bed, close but not touching. I didn't read everything, I know. But I wanted to. I looked at him, steady. "That's the difference between you and the man I thought you were." We sat in silence for a while, drinking. The tea was too strong. The coffee was too weak. But neither of us complained. Something about the discomfort felt earned. Later that afternoon, I found him in the library. The fire was low. The light was warm. He was on the couch reading, barefoot, in a t-shirt I'd never seen before. Probably one he kept hidden under custom suits. I stood in the doorway longer than I needed to, then walked in and sat beside him. Not close, not far, just enough to feel the heat radiating from where his thigh rested against the cushion. He looked at me once, then back at the page. "You're quiet," he said. "You're not used to that? Not from you. Maybe you're just learning to hear me." The book in his lap slipped closed. He turned toward me, slightly. Not fully. Enough. "I've been thinking," he said, "about control, about why I need it." I said nothing. And I think I finally figured it out. It's not because I'm afraid of losing. It's because I never trusted what happens after. After what? After someone sees me. He looked at me. Really looked. And this time, I didn't shift away. I let my body turn. I moved slowly, not dramatically. Not like a scene, but like gravity. I shifted until my head came to rest lightly against his shoulder. His arm didn't move. He didn't lean into it. He didn't pull away. He simply let me stay. I closed my eyes. Not because I was tired, but because the feeling of stillness was louder than I expected. "This doesn't mean I forgive you," I whispered. "For what?" "For making me feel like I had to be strategic in the first place." He nodded. I felt the movement against my temple. "And this," he said, "doesn't mean I've changed." "Then what does it mean?" "That maybe we've both stopped pretending." We stayed like that for a long time. No kiss, no confession, no climax, just breathing. Two people finally too tired to perform. And in that quiet, I realized something I hadn't planned for. Not love. Not yet. But the possibility of choosing rest and calling it enough for now. When I left the room, I didn't say goodbye. He didn't stop me. But when I reached the hallway, I heard his voice. Low. Quiet. The first thing he'd said without armor since this began. I don't want to go back to who I was. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from unrest. From release. I opened the notebook, turned to a clean page, and for the first time, wrote not about him, but about us. Today, I rested my head. Not to surrender, but because the weight was no longer mine to carry alone. The first morning we didn't try to outmaneuver each other felt strange. Not empty, just undramatic. No lines rehearsed, no moves planned. No waiting for the other to misstep. Just sunlight. Just silence. Just us. Caleb made breakfast. Real breakfast. No mismatched mugs. No burned toast. He didn't ask what I wanted. He remembered. I didn't thank him. He didn't need me to. We ate on the back porch. The lake glimmered in the distance like a secret trying to behave. "You're leaving today," he said after the second cup of tea. It wasn't a question. "Just for a few days," I replied. "I need time to think somewhere that isn't laced with strategy." He nodded. No protest. No baiting. He was learning. "Will you come back?" he asked. "Would you ask me not to go if I said no?" He smiled faintly. Not the cold smile. A quieter one. Sad. Grounded. "No." "Good." I packed lightly. 1 bag, 2 dresses, my notebook. I left the original one here, the old leather one, filled with all the data I'd once weaponized. I didn't need it anymore. I wanted him to find it again someday, and see that I'd stopped writing in it, that I no longer needed a record of his flaws, because they weren't mine to control. Before I left, I walked into his office, the one he used to lock. He was standing by the window, not reading, not working, just being. "What happens next?" he asked without turning. "Nothing," I said. He turned then, brow furrowed. "Nothing?" We stop playing. We stop measuring. We stop earning each other. And what do we do instead? We choose. I walk toward him, slow but steady. The way I used to move when I was calculating distance. Only now I was just covering space. When I reached him, I took his hand. He didn't grip mine. He let it rest, held, not owned. "You once told me I was the first person who made you unsure." "You still are." "Good," I said. "Because that means you're here for me, not for the version of me you understand." He looked down at our hands. "I used to think love was leverage. I used to think love was a lie," I replied. We both smiled, not at each other, but at how far we'd come. Before I left, I gave him a square of fabric, linen, hand-stitched, the same ivory as the dress I'd made for our wedding. In one corner, I'd embroidered something, not my name, not his. Just this: "No one stays for power. They stay when there's nothing left to take." He read it, said nothing, but I saw his throat tighten. I didn't kiss him goodbye. That wasn't our rhythm. I just walked to the door, paused, and looked back. "You know I don't belong to you," I said. He nodded. "I'm just hoping you come back because you belong with me." I left. The car pulled away from the house and turned down the gravel road. I didn't cry. Didn't second guess. I'd done everything I came to do, and none of it had to end with ownership. A week passed. I didn't write, didn't plan, didn't observe. I rested. And somewhere in the stillness I realized the game was never between us. It had always been between who we thought we had to be and who we were becoming when no one was watching. I returned quietly. No message, no announcement. I walked through the door of that house and placed my bag at the foot of the stairs. He appeared, not as a shadow, not as a force, just him. He didn't say anything. He walked to me, reached out, and touched my wrist with 2 fingers. A question, not a command. I slid my hand into his, not as a prize, as a partner. We didn't say "I love you." We didn't need to. Some things don't arrive in words. They arrive in the space where words used to be necessary. That night, as he slept beside me, his breathing even, his arm loose across my waist, I opened a new notebook. Not leather, not worn. Clean. New pages. The first line I wrote was not about him. It was about me. I was never the virgin bride. I was the only one playing. But I stayed, because he finally stopped trying to win me. If you felt something while reading, hit that like button. It tells me you were here. And if you want more stories like this, layered, slow burning, and just a little dangerous, subscribe and stay close. The next one might just find you before you're ready.